Tēnā koe hoa. Before I share my pepeha, I just had a thought when I was standing here about the waves. And a few years ago, someone shared a picture that they had, a vision, a word of knowledge, however you would, just a picture of me. And they shared it with me and they had no idea what it meant at the time. And they said I was, I don't know, on the seas, on a ship, not usually a place I hang out. And they said that I saw the land and I went, ooh, and I went over there and decided to go jump on the land and where the grass was greener. And when I got there, all was not as it seemed, and that the waters lifted up. They didn't know anything about what was going on for me at the time. The waters lifted up and consumed the land that I was standing on, and then I was under the water drowning. And that was a fun picture. And then the hand of Jesus reached under the water and went, come here, and grabbed me and put me on a log, not a ship, you'll notice, not a cruise ship, not even a battleship, but a log, and put me on the log. And when I was on the log, I was still wearing my Salvation Army uniform, complete with epaulets like this guy over here, Chris. Again, not something I usually wear, but the Lord was speaking to me in a moment where all I could see was under the water. And so I was just thinking about what you were saying, Scotty, wherever you are, about for those who are feeling that at the moment. May the Lord bring you a vision, a picture of the way he redeems and rescues, not just at the moment you went, yes, I will follow Jesus my whole life, but in the moment where you're making decisions, making choices, and sometimes choices are taken away from you, and you have to reach for that hand. Ko waia hau e tuake nei, i te taho tōku pāpā on my father's side, he uria hau no Ngāpuhi, no Te Raroa, no ngā iwi o tauranga moana, i te puake au i te taho tōku māma. On my mother's side, he uria hau no Ngāti Airahi, Ngāti Kotimana, Ngāti Ingarangi. On my mother's side, I'm Irish, Scottish, and a little bit English. On my father's side, I hail from the north, from Ngāpuhi, the land of the signing of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, where that first conversation began to happen, where the gospel first arrived in 1814 as a conversation between Samuel Marsden, Ruatara, and a whole lot of people. Notwithstanding, there were a whole lot of other kōrero that happened between God and my people before that happened to arrive on a ship. That's a little bit about who I am. Here's a test. First two parts I'll do, the third part you do. If you're like really shy, just tell your neighbour what you think the answer is. Ready? There's three parts. I'll do the first two. He ao, he ao. Hands up if you knew that. Hands up. Put your hands up in the air. I want to see. Put your hands up if you knew the third part. Up. Right up. I heard it. There was about 5 people. He ao, he ao, he ao te aroa. This is the kōrero when my ancestors arrived to Aotearoa. And Kuramarotini and Kupe arrive to the north, to Hokianga. And as she sees the land, she sees this big, long, white cloud over it. And she says, he ao, he ao, he ao te aroa. And so this is over 40 generations ago. And like many Māori, I'm a direct descendant of Kupe. And there's a kōrero around how one of the very special treasured waka that took Kupe and everybody he loved and knew to where he was going, the name of that waka was Matawhaorua. However, his grandson, Nukutawhiti, wanted to take another journey to come back to Aotearoa. So Kupe came here and then he returned, and then his grandson wanted to come back. But he said, you know what? We need to do a little bit of refitting because actually I want to take more people with me and this is not going to cut it. So he reached for some cutting tools. what you might call ngā toki pounamu, greenstone adzes. They're not just pretty to look at, but these can be formed into an edge, which is very important to be able to cut through things and change shapes. And so there were karakia that released the mana of Kupe as the captain of that particular waka, and karakia that bestowed upon the new captain of the ship, Nuku Tawhiti, the responsibility, the mana for what was a refitted, re-adzed waka, renamed Ngā Toki Matawhaorua. And that was a ship that came back, the waka that came back carrying our people to the north, Te Rarawa, Ngāpuhi. Many of them, when they share their pepehas, I will in a moment, you'll hear them say Ngā Toki Matawhaorua. Many of the things that I share, I hope you can hear in them what I'm getting at without me having to restate, because I've only got 20 minutes. So hopefully you can hear just in that story. And as I share, there'll be a lot of those moments where within what we've always known or the stories we've always known, there are these lessons for what it means for us to move forward, to refit things, re-adds them, rename them, hand over power. Right? So I won't restate them. I'll just assume you know what I'm on about. And they crossed what has been renamed the Pacific Ocean, but we know as Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, the largest body of free water in the entire world. We're an ocean people. Where are you, Jeremy? Jeremy, who spoke last night? What's up? We're an ocean people. You're speaking to an ocean people. And that was so cool to hear what you're saying about the waves, because we're an ocean people. And there's a picture, a very famous picture, you can Google it. Goldie painted in the 1800s the arrival of the Maoris to New Zealand. Now, what he depicted was a double hull waka, and in that waka, these starving people, emaciated and exhausted, who somehow tidally drifted here and accidentally ended up discovering, for real, Aotearoa, he Aotearoa. And so what that artwork betrays is a point of view. And so I want to challenge some of that today and offer some thoughts that come from a Māori worldview, I don't speak for everybody, but just the things that I have had passed to me. In contrast to Goldie's whakaaro, his thoughts about our people, we're actually a way-finding people. It's in our DNA. Generation upon generation, we just find ways. Because we're the largest body of ocean water, free water in the world. So there's no bus, there's no plane. You have to find a way. And so this is at the same time, while we're finding a way, some of the people in Europe still think the earth is flat. And if you go too far, you'll drop off the end. And we knew that that simply wasn't true. And so without sextants, magnetic compasses and maps, somehow our people managed to find their way, discovering all kinds of new islands. And over time, the movement through what we now might call the Pacific, 25 million square kilometres of water, we managed to find our way. There's a book called Wayfinding Leadership, and it's written by Cherise Spiller, Hoturoa Barclay Kerr, and John Pānoho, Wayfinding Leadership. Such a good book. Read it. It's on all the different platforms. Listen, read, whatever. Google, YouTube. And there's a couple of thoughts I want to offer from that book. One is this notion of stepping into your rangatira space. Now, rangatira, I want to unpack that word using this gift that someone amazing from Rotorua gave me about 2 months ago. Rangatira. You hear that word all the time. What does it really mean? If you have a look at within the word, there's a couple of concepts in there. Ranga, which is about weaving, traditionally weaving flax or other fibres, and tira, which means people. So a rangatira is someone who has the ability to understand the different strands and strengths and types of people, ages, all of that sort of thing, and find a way to bring together, be together, expose the pattern that is just waiting to be exposed and form it into something that is far more collective. And so a rangatira is someone who can weave together the people. So it's a form of leadership. Stepping into your rangatira-tanga, your rangatira space, is about moving into healthy, deliberate tension, not just having one thread, one dominant thread, but appreciating all the different colours and contributions. It's this notion of rangatira-tanga is not about that triangle hierarchical, I have a position over you. In fact, it's actually, I have a role with you to bring out the best in you for future generations, mokopuna decisions, not just me and you, but who's coming after us. It's always been about who's coming along the road later. And it comes with a fierce commitment to your people. Fierce advocacy. See, the difference I would say in being in different spaces is that Māori, while there are many very humble, very quiet, the kumara doesn't speak of its own sweetness and such things. On the other hand, we're not afraid to say what we think. It's just a Māori thing. It's an honest thing. It would be disrespectful not to tell you. Do you know what I mean? And then being brought up in my Pākeha family as well, there's another side to that culture which is actually, while very articulate in certain situations, not always afraid, not always willing to be honest out loud in front of the people because it's considered impolite and disrespectful. So hang on, Māori, respectful, say what I think. Pākeha, disrespectful to say what you think. You can see already how some of that weaving might go a little astray. And so we have a fierce commitment to our people, which you need to remember that might look like people might say what they think, but they can still love you afterwards. Just because someone says, right, cup of tea, okay? And it's actually out of love. Sometimes it's bothering to try and have a relationship with you, that someone will be upfront with you because they think there's a hope and a future. The second thing within that book, Wayfinding Leadership, which I found really helpful, is about calling the island to you. It's the idea of when you're feeling seasick, that you would look to the horizon and actually it comes towards you, you're not coming towards it. That naturally if you position yourself well and you read all of the signs that are in your environment that are available, learn to read them, and then posture yourself, align yourself, the horizon cannot help but come to you. It's a bee coming, not a bee going. And so reading the signs, for example, for us as navigators, not tidal drifters, as navigators, we had to learn things like the flight path of homing birds. When they're on their way home, they're going that way. That means, we had to learn that kind of thing. Star patterns and paths. Matariki, very much why Māori are interested in the sky, not just, isn't that so pretty, but actually, isn't that so practical? And so clouds form differently over land than they do over sea. All these sorts of things, wave frequencies, the way waves roll, all of that sort of stuff. When you don't know, it just looks nice. It's a lovely day. When you know, you're like, yes, right. And you reorientate yourself to your environment. And then you actually find the horizon, the island, the goal, the vision, what you're actually wanting begins to come closer to you simply because you reorientated yourself. The stillness of listening and looking, observing, that's in the DNA of Māori and Pacific people. So if you have eyes to see and ears to hear, you begin to find those people. And you realise that the people that you might have just thought were drifters are actually your navigators. The people that you didn't even consider might want to get on board with what you're doing. Not only might want to get on board, but might be able to tell you how to reorientate things so that the island comes towards you. I also want to talk about the soil of Aotearoa. This is so important because our heart is for the things that we're talking about these 2 days. But we have to recognise where we are. This is a really important key. And it can be one of the things that you never get past a certain point because you actually haven't recognised where you are. You're in Aotearoa. And that's a wonderful thing. How Aotearoa. Yes, history has happened and we are where we are, but it will never change that we are right here in Te Moana Nui a Kiwa. We are in Aotearoa. It doesn't matter how many languages, we are in this place. Awesome. Read the signs and learn the history. Learn the history. Why? Not just as an intellectual exercise or to show off, learn all the jargony words, show that you've done your learning. No, but as a heart exercise, as a relational exercise, as a spiritual exercise, because when you learn that history, God can use more of you. More of you. It's a wairua thing. We're not in the West. It's all right, I'm just a little bit going to go there. We are, but we're not really. So I understand the whakapapa of the West, not as a location, but as all that other stuff. But there is more. If you only ever look at the West for ideas, you'll miss what's right here in not the West. There, I said it. Quick, move on. Okay. For example, there's lots of stories about how kumara got here. I really appreciate kumara. We had a hangi last week. Oh, my favourite bit was not the pork, the chicken, or the lamb. It was the kumara. Thank you very much. And how did that beautiful thing get to survive in this environment? Because it wasn't actually here before, right? Neither was the gospel corridor, right? It got here. But how did it get to survive the harsh conditions? Because people paid attention to the environment. They didn't just try to make it be like it was, I don't know, in the West or wherever kumara comes from, I'm not sure. But they went, these temperatures in this place, they get pretty low at this time of day. They're hot so what are we going to do to actually keep these tubers warm so they can survive through and get to a place where they can be planted and grow and turn into kai? And so people got creative and they did things like volcanic rock that it stores the heat during the day and then it radiates warmth at night. Oh, how scientific is that? What do you mean Māori is scientific? That's exactly right. So much knowledge is in things like how did we survive and thrive and grow food. And so these practices that have happened here for a long time come from a people who are very creative and innovative, and there's so much here just in Te Moana Nui a Kiwa. So I would really encourage people, hands up, be honest, it's okay if you don't know for now, but put your hand up. Do you know about the doctrine of discovery? Who's heard about it? Right up the top so I can, okay, cool. Who's never heard of it? The doctrine of discovery. I don't have PowerPoints because I'm always finding people to talk to and I never have time for PowerPoint, sorry. But the doctrine of discovery, go find out because it involves the church. It's the doctrine of Christian discovery. And it actually has a big impact here, even though some might say it doesn't. I think it does. The Declaration of Independence, not in America. Hands up who knows about that? But more? Yep, fantastic. You want to find out about that. It was a statement of the obvious where Māori said, we have mana over these lands that we live in before you got here. And so that's a statement of the obvious. Learn that. Why is it so important? Because if you never learn these things, who's heard of te tiriti or waitangi? Now we're talking. Okay. Who understands? You don't have to put your hand up now. It's getting tiring. But the church's involvement, Christian involvement in these documents, right? In the doctrine of discovery, in Declaration of Independence, in Te Tiriti. The church was involved, was not absent, but was involved. There are some things about that, but if you don't know your history, it's very hard to understand Aotearoa. It's very hard to understand why the tubers that you're planting in the ground are just not getting past. Why are we not getting past? Because there's something in the recipe of how we do relationship that needs to include the context that you're in, the environment that you're in. If you want this thing that's over here, if you want to see the island, your vision, your dream, reorientate yourself by learning these beautiful and sometimes hugely uncomfortable histories And know this, it's not your fault what happened yesterday, a long time ago, but I've now told you what you can do to remedy it. So it is your fault if you don't go and listen. All right? I'm telling you. I've told you. It's on record. If you now do nothing, now it's your fault. You're welcome. But really, it isn't your fault what happened. So go in there with a friend. Go in with someone you can trust and be like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. I know. But I bet you it was more uncomfortable for us. And so the breaches, learn about them. Learn about the confiscations and land theft. Learn about things that were hidden. I just need to check the time because I could go till 2 p.m. Learn about those things. Oh, yeah. Where's my phone? Oh, yeah. Okay, then. Over here. Learn about those things that the law was used, policy was used, the New Zealand Herald was used, the Bank of New Zealand was used to do things at the very beginning of what you might call the founding of New Zealand, but we would say an interruption and a completely different trajectory from what we had planned, from what our dreams and visions were, where Māori were decentered, where our mana, our authority, our rangatiratanga was completely displaced and removed, despite the promises actually in the spiritual covenant of the treaty, despite the church's assurances and the many cups of tea with my ancestors by Henry Williams, who baptised many of my ancestors, but Patuone in particular, who signed that treaty, who signed the Declaration of Independence, who was baptised by Henry Williams. And yet, these things happen. The disillusionment that you feel about what's happening in the world today, we understand that in a different way, about being decentered and pushed to the margins. The vilification, the assassination, the displacement. And what does that look like today? Because sometimes people haven't connected all the dots. And what are the results of broken promises and breaches? And within the treaty where it says that Māori would thrive and have, that kind of equality to British citizenship, I read that as Māori should have equal outcome, equitable outcomes, which means if your kids do well in school, my kids should do well in school. If you live to that age, I should live to that age. If that equitable, that we all thrive. But if you were to have a look into the state of things at the moment, if you were to pull apart the threads and see not just the summary of numbers around Aotearoa, but the specific ones for Māori, iwi Māori, you would see Māori overrepresented in prison statistics and negative educational outcomes. That doesn't sound like treaty promises. Financially, our incomes on average are far less. Housing, who do we see in our Salvation Army Rotorua houses? Like 80% of the people who come for support that we engage with, 80 to 90% are Māori. We have to go looking for Māori to engage with. That's who's right now going through the tough stuff. Lots of people are. But why is it that Māori are so overrepresented? My father passed away on May the 12th. And he had served, him and his wife led a kura kaupapa Māori for 30 years. And he served in his community for a long time. And then a year after retiring, 5 years later than anyone else, because money, not many people to do that role, all these factors meant that my dad had a later retirement. And he retired and got to enjoy a whole 6 months of his retirement. And then he died 12 years, less than the average age of anyone else in Aotearoa Pākeha New Zealanders. That's so unfair that he didn't get to enjoy his grandkids, his great-grandkids, me, his KiwiSaver fund. You know, all these little things, they're real. They're not just statistics to us. On the other hand, there is something else that's in the soil too. And when I teach on Te Tiriti o Waitangi, I do two timelines. The timeline of colonisation and all that ugly stuff you just heard, but way more in depth. And another timeline. It's the timeline of Māori actions in response to Crown actions. Māori actions in response to church actions or inactions, whichever. It's that timeline. And that whole timeline is also in our soil. You need to know that so many Māori engaged with the story of the gospel with Jesus. They were fascinated with Jesus. And because we're a collective people, not just, I think I, myself, over here will come over and join this faith. Yo, over here. And so we all, like so many people, the whole countries, tribes, went, who is this Jesus? Ka nuku nuku kaneke neke. 400 Ngāpuhi respond to the gospel when Ruatara translated it from what Samuel Marsden had to say. And they stand up with, there must be moving, there must be space made. We have to do something to respond to what we have just heard. And they responded en masse. And then in the decades afterwards, we responded en masse. That's still in our soil. As much as the story of breaches and hurts and blah, blah, blah is all there, so is the story of Jesus loves us. We also are created in his image. That's in our story too. That's in our whenua. That's in the DNA of Māori. Even if they've never had an encounter with the risen Lord, it's in their DNA. I can almost guarantee you that for everyone who is Māori in this country, there is a DNA memory on top of just the fact that we all bear the image of God. In our being, there is bravery and courage, resistance, renaissance, resilience. All this stuff has happened over the years. And you need to know that wherever you go and do whatever you do. This is in the soil. It's in the atmosphere. It's in the trees and in the waterways. So funny thing, we went to Canada last year with a group and we went to this water and this guy that was with us who's Māori and he's very in touch, you know. He's a Christian and he was like, whoa, your water feels real calm. And I went about where we were in Jericho Bay in Canada in Vancouver. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, their water here feels very calm. And he said, as opposed to the water in Ngāpuhi, the water knows too all these things. And we've sung for years up in Waitangi. We sing into that atmosphere, into the trees and over the water and, you know, because God created all creation. What are the words in that song? Something about all creation. We're going to get in on it. And so we want to sing worship. That's what's in our soil right here. That's what's in our waterways. One of the responses to the crown, there's so many hundreds and thousands of things, but I'll tell you something, because it involves my dad. There was something called Ngā Tamatoa that was formed in the 1970s. Has anyone heard of that? Oh my goodness. Anyone heard of the Black Panthers? The New Zealand version. So Ngā Tamatoa, my dad was in Ngā Tamatoa. And so were lots of other activists. And what were they doing? They were fiercely passionate about what they believed in, their faith and their people and future generations and this thing that was so important that people call them activists. Fine, whatever, just being passionate. And things like the 1975 Land March from the top right down to Parliament, yeah, they were involved in mobilising, getting things happen. Why? Because they had relationships in all these communities. When they joined that network up, oh my goodness, they arrived at Parliament's door. And that was led, the figurehead was Whina Kupa from the place that I come from, in Panguru, in Hokianga. Whina Kupa, a Catholic. They're Christians, eh? A Christian led this movement all the way through to Parliament. Kia ora. Another moment that happened was with Eva Rickard. Eva Rickard, there was whenua that after World War II was taken by the government for military purposes, and after the war, they forgot somehow to return this really important piece of land, despite several requests, formal and informal, from iwi Māori there. And they turned the land into a golf course. Eva Rickard, a Christian woman, she knew about it, she found out about it, and she got stuck in, gotten people involved. And my dad happened to have a job at this place where they stored the records around land stuff. So he stole the records that she took to court and won the case that had the land come back. I was like, what? I only found out about that at the tangi. I'm sitting there going, yes, go Dad. How cool is that? I want to read you something that's written by Jordan Rapana. Some of you might know her. Jordan Rapana. She was also in Vancouver that time when we were looking at the calm water that we didn't recognise because we're from Ngāpuhi. And Jordan is, she's a bit of a singer, and she's currently winning all sorts of awards at the moment. Known as Jordan with a Y. But I just want to, be awkward and find this for a moment, because she articulates so beautifully what happened in that time when Eva stood up and did what she did. Can you give me a minute's thing, Scotty? 3? I can read really fast. Okay. During World War II, New Zealand government took the land, blah, blah, blah. Can you hear the voices? Can you hear the voices? Chaotic and contrasting, busy, aggressive, in total juxtaposition with the blissful February summer sun shining over a glistening green golf course. And there by the 9th hole you can see her. She, alongside many others, occupies the whenua like she knows there, because she has grown there. Her story is indented in the grooves that line her countenance, her brows furrowed in deep-seated fervour for justice, a worthy fight. Her heart beating in time with the whenua, she plants her feet to claim back a birthright, an earthright, a perplexing paradox. She charges us forward by standing completely still. There on the lush golf course, a perfect fantasy of everything it was never meant to be. She remains, disrupting their daydream, seemingly with very few, but in actuality, the bones of her predecessors and the generations of whakapapa, a prophetic anticipation of where her own bones would eventually find rest. And in a bewildering moment, in the midst of the familiar jingles of protest, she, a justice warrior, comes into contact with the recognised faces of so-called justice keepers. The juncture that bleeds beyond the confinements of a 40-year-old picture, the defining moment televised nationally of her arrest. Eva Rickard is dragged from the premises, hands in cuffs on account of trespassing. It's almost humorous, trespassing on the land that rightfully belongs to her hapu. And it goes on, but I only have 3 minutes. And near the end, Rickard's story serves as a legacy to us, her whānau in Christ. We have amazing opportunities every day to uphold that legacy, unlearning, relearning, taking our partnership responsibilities seriously. At the core of all the affirmations of Rickard's leadership, she, a mum, a wife, a volunteer at Plunkett, an elder at the local church, was simply one who heard God's calling, and she ran into it, into eternity. How much more could we participate in God's mission for our local context and our nation? How much more could we operate as treaty partners? This fundamental and covenantal relationship is God's gift to our nation that comes with responsibility for both parties to become strong hosts to every other nation that finds a place of belonging in Aotearoa. My encouragement to you, just go follow up on those things that I shared. Go find someone to talk to. Go do your part of this treaty partnership that maybe some of your ancestors didn't follow through with, but now it's in your hands. That's in your hands. And with your hallelujah, bring the attention of Jesus into the places where you are. In fact, let Jesus bring your attention to where he is. And lift up a sound, lift up a shout. Our reo Māori, our haka, our karanga, our waiata, let them join your expressions of worship, your expressions of fight, your expressions of hope to bring mutual blessing for all of us. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Kia ora. We're just going to sing a